Captain Harper settled into the cockpit of her C-130 cargo plane, the familiar hum of engines vibrating under her hands. She ran through her pre-flight checklist with methodical precision, the same routine she had performed hundreds of times over the past decade. Every flick of a switch, every gauge she scanned, was part of a carefully orchestrated ritual. To anyone observing, appeared calm, almost serene, a professional whose life revolved around discipline and precision. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet tension hummed, an awareness that flying was never truly routine, no matter how predictable the schedule. The plane lifted smoothly off the tarmac of Denver International Airport, carrying essential supplies bound for a small airfield in Montana. Sunlight poured through the cockpit windows, glinting off polished instruments and casting golden streaks across focused expression. The Rocky Mountains stretched endlessly below her, snow-dusted peaks glowing in the morning light. It was beautiful, almost hypnotic, but knew better than to let admiration distract her. In the sky, even a momentary lapse could have deadly consequences. She took a sip of lukewarm coffee, scanning the radar out of habit. There were a few blips nearby, commercial flights harmless, she assumed, but one in particular caught her eye. It moved erratically, faster than the surrounding traffic, yet at first glance seemed innocuous. She leaned forward, adjusting the radar range, squinting at the screen. Was it a glitch? A weather anomaly? Had learned early in her career that suspicion, tempered by calm, was an invaluable tool. She filed it away mentally but didn't act yet. After all, it was still early in the flight, and the airspace was usually crowded. Her thoughts drifted briefly to the mundane reality of her life. She was proud of her career, proud of her skills, yet she often felt overlooked. Cargo pilots were rarely celebrated. They delivered supplies quietly without fanfare or attention. Flights were essential, yes, but to most, she was invisible, a faceless operator ensuring trucks in the sky kept moving. It was a life of discipline and solitude, punctuated by fleeting moments of connection over radio chatter. She liked it that way. Predictability had a rhythm, and rhythm, she believed, could save lives when the unexpected struck. Suddenly, a crackle over the radio snapped her out of her thoughts. A voice, strained and urgent, filtered through static. "Control, this is Flight 492, oxygen levels dropping, emergency at 30,000 feet. The voice was shaky, panicked. Froze for a moment, her mind registering what was happening. Emergency protocols flashed through her memory. She knew the voice didn't belong to her. This was another flight, a stranger in distress, miles away, but the responsibility was immediate. Air traffic control scrambled instructions, but the code was garbled, indecipherable. The voice repeated, desperation edging every word. Instincts kicked in. She leaned forward, adjusting frequencies, listening closely. Her eyes darted between radar, altimeter, and compass. She deciphered the scrambled transmission, her calm voice slicing through chaos as she issued precise instructions. Maintain heading 320. Reduce speed to 270 knots. I copy your oxygen readings. Adjust cabin pressure now. I've got you. Seconds stretched into eternity. One misstep could send the plane spiraling or worse, cost lives. Sweat pricked her brow, yet her hands moved with steady assurance. Realized that she had stepped into a moment far beyond routine, a test of skill, focus, and courage. Outside, the mountains seemed indifferent, majestic, unchanging, but knew the sky's serenity was deceptive. Somewhere unseen, forces were aligning, challenging her experience and resolve. This was the day her ordinary life as a cargo pilot would intersect with something extraordinary. She tightened her grip on the yoke, took a deep breath, and prepared to face the unknown. And then she noticed the blips again, faster, sharper, moving closer than they should have been. The airspace was no longer just crowded, it was alerting her, warning her. Pulse quickened. This was more than a routine flight. She wasn't just transporting cargo anymore. Today, the sky demanded something from her, something she hadn't known she possessed. And she was ready. Heart hammered in rhythm with the plane's engines as she processed the emergency call. Flight 492, another pilot, a stranger, struggling at 30,000 feet, oxygen failing. Air traffic control's voice crackled, panicked, throwing scrambled instructions into the cockpit like confetti in a storm. Squinted at the screen, scanning coordinates, altitude, and speed, filtering chaos into actionable decisions. Her hands moved with a practiced precision born of years flying cargo through turbulence and storm, over mountains and rivers. Yet this was different. This was urgent. Lives depended on her, not just on autopilot procedures, but on instinct, calm, and skill. She immediately contacted the distressed pilot, her voice calm, confident, slicing through the static. Flight 492, this is Captain Harper. Copy your emergency. Maintain heading 320, reduce speed to 270 knots. Adjust cabin pressure now. I've got you. Each instruction was deliberate, measured. She knew panic was contagious and the pilot's frayed nerves could tip the balance. Spoke as if commanding a squad, though she was only a cargo pilot, not a rescuer. Yet in that moment, she was exactly what the situation demanded. Radar blips flickered violently. She noticed that one of the signals was no ordinary commercial jet. It moved faster, sharper, almost predatory. Felt a twinge of unease, yet she kept focus. The immediate priority was Flight 492. Oxygen levels were dropping, cabin alarms wailing intermittently. She instructed the pilot on emergency descent protocols, calculating glide paths and fuel burn with precision. His voice remained steady, authoritative, a tether of calm in a storm of chaos. The minutes stretched taut. Flight 492 began trembling violently as turbulence from nearby mountains caught the jet, guided them like a coach directing an athlete in critical competition. Keep your wings level, correct your yaw slowly, don't overcompensate. Her words were met with shaky replies, but the pilot obeyed, trusting her even though he didn't know her name. She visualized the aircraft's trajectory, adjusting her own flight to provide maximum support and guidance, anticipating wind shear and sudden altitude drops. Suddenly, radar picked up multiple fast-moving contacts converging toward their location. Stomach dropped. Military jets, F-22s, sleek, formidable, deadly. Their sudden appearance was inexplicable. She caught herself gripping the yoke, but her voice remained even. The F-22 pilots scanned, assessed, and prepared to intercept, but calm, precise instructions kept Flight 492 steady. Somehow in the chaos, she had become a central figure, an unlikely orchestrator of aerial safety. Air traffic control shouted updates but filtered only the essentials. She coordinated, calculated, and adapted on the fly, improvising maneuvers she had never formally trained for. The cargo plane, once a simple vessel for supplies, had become the hub of a high-stakes aerial drama. Each turn, each adjustment could mean life or death, not just for Flight 492, but for herself, for the approaching jets, for everyone below in towns reliant on the cargo she carried. Through it all, reflected briefly on her years of preparation, the countless routine flights that had seemed dull, the long nights of navigation exercises and simulator runs. Every mundane hour had built her skill. Every repetition had honed instincts she now relied upon in an emergency beyond ordinary comprehension. She realized almost silently that being just a cargo pilot was never the truth. Her training had always prepared her for the unexpected. Minutes felt like hours as guided Flight 492 toward lower altitudes safely. The stricken pilot responded, oxygen stabilizing, trembling but alive. The blips on her radar grew clearer, forming a new puzzle. The F-22s moving in formation, eyes on her cargo plane now, acknowledging her authority and competence. Pulse steadied, even as adrenaline surged. She was no longer invisible, no longer just a cargo pilot. She had become a lifeline, a calm in the chaos, a force the sky had recognized. The sun dipped behind distant peaks, casting long shadows over the cockpit. Exhaled slowly, though tension remained. The crisis was partially resolved, yet the unknown presence of the jets hinted at a new, greater challenge ahead. The routine flight of the morning had transformed into a mission demanding courage, skill, and unflinching focus, and knew that the sky would not let her return to ordinary. Not yet. His pulse quickened as the F-22s drew closer, their sleek silhouettes cutting through the sky with a silent, predatory grace. The radar showed multiple fast-moving blips converging on her position. She glanced at her instruments, her mind calculating trajectory, speed, and altitude. These weren't ordinary commercial or civilian aircraft. The military jets were elite, top of the line, and they were responding to her, her call sign, though she hadn't requested any military assistance. Her fingers hovered over the yoke, a mixture of awe and apprehension tightening in her chest. This was no longer a simple cargo mission. The lead F-22 pilot's voice crackled over the radio, authoritative but cautious. "Identify yourself, cargo plane. Confirm intentions." Swallowed, her throat dry, yet her voice remained steady. "This is Captain Harper, C-130, en route to Helena, Montana. I'm escorting an emergency flight, Flight 492. No hostile intent. Request guidance." The jets didn't immediately respond. Their engines screamed with controlled power, the sheer speed and agility of the F-22s sending ripples of turbulence across her plane. The cargo plane rocked slightly, and she instinctively adjusted the flaps, careful not to disrupt the delicate balance of altitude and speed. She felt a strange thrill, the kind that came from confronting danger she hadn't anticipated. A cargo pilot, usually invisible in the sky, now became the focal point of a high-stakes aerial operation. Her instincts sharpened, honed over years of navigating stormy weather and treacherous airspace. Guided Flight 492 with her left hand on the radio, her right steady on the controls, eyes darting between instruments and the approaching F-22s. Each decision mattered. Misjudgment could trigger disaster. She realized that the sky was no longer just a canvas for routine flights. It was a chessboard, and she was moving pieces she had never imagined. The F-22 pilots began responding with clipped, precise instructions, creating a fragile choreography. Adapted, issuing commands to Flight 492 while simultaneously negotiating the presence of the military jets. Their synchronized movements were mesmerizing, a dance of speed and precision, and felt both fear and exhilaration. Every maneuver required split-second judgment, every adjustment a potential difference between life and catastrophe. She marveled at the efficiency and discipline of the pilots surrounding her, yet they deferred to her authority, the civilian cargo pilot orchestrating a delicate balance in the air. Time seemed to stretch, each second a careful negotiation of physics, instinct, and human skill. Felt the weight of responsibility settling into her shoulders. She was no longer just a pilot. The emergency, the approaching F-22s, the lives below her, everything had converged to demand more than training, more than routine. She relied on intuition, on calm judgment, on every ounce of experience she had accumulated in years of solitary flights. Each command she gave, each course correction was a lifeline. Her mind briefly flicked to Flight 492's pilot, trusting her implicitly despite the chaos. His voice remained calm, guiding him with precision, her own fear suppressed under sheer focus. She caught sight of a town below, a patchwork of fields and rivers glinting in the sunlight, unaware of the aerial drama unfolding above. Every decision she made would ripple downward, touching lives she had never met. And somehow in that moment, she embraced the enormity of her role. Finally, the lead F-22 pilot's tone shifted, acknowledgement clear. "Understood, Captain Harper. You're in command. Maintain heading, we'll escort." Relief washed over her briefly, but tension remained. She was still responsible for Flight 492, for her cargo, for navigating a sky suddenly filled with elite military aircraft. Exhaled slowly, her hands steady. The challenge was far from over, but she had claimed her space in the chaos. The cargo pilot, once ordinary, had become indispensable. As the jets formed a protective barrier around her, felt an unexpected surge of pride. The routine flight that began with golden mountains and humdrum instructions had transformed into a high-stakes ballet. She realized, in that suspended moment between danger and safety, that the sky had recognized her skill, courage, and authority. She was no longer invisible, and for the first time she understood what it meant to command the attention and respect of the most elite pilots in the nation. Tightened her grip on the yoke as the cargo plane lurched violently, turbulence sweeping across the Rockies like an invisible hand. Snow-capped peaks glinted beneath her, deceptively serene, while winds whipped her plane in unpredictable gusts. The F-22s flanked her on both sides, sleek and lethal, their pilots anticipating her every move, yet deferring to her authority. Each adjustment required precision, too sharp, and the plane would tilt dangerously, endangering its precious cargo and Flight 492 trailing behind. She felt the familiar burn of adrenaline in her muscles, a signal that every nerve was alive, every sense heightened. Her mind raced, calculating weight distribution, wind velocity, and optimal trajectory. She toggled the flaps, adjusted throttles, and made subtle corrections to avoid the worst of the turbulence. The cargo inside shifted with every shudder, a reminder of the stakes, medical supplies, vital to people waiting on the ground. His breath remained controlled, even as instruments flickered and the plane shuddered. Fear and exhilaration intertwined. She had faced rough skies before, but never under this scrutiny, never with jets capable of overtaking her in seconds. As she maneuvered, thoughts drifted briefly to her journey to this moment. Years of pre-dawn simulations, long hours in lonely hangars, and countless flights across unpredictable terrain had trained her hands and instincts for moments like these. Every mundane flight, every checklist repeated 1,000 times, had prepared her to act decisively under pressure. Yet this was different. The presence of F-22s, the emergency Flight 492, the invisible stakes pressing from miles below and above. Ordinary training had become extraordinary application. She was living the reality she had only imagined in drills. The lead F-22 pilot's voice crackled, clipped, and efficient. "Adjust heading 20 degrees north. Maintain altitude. We've got you covered." Nodded though they could not see her and made the adjustment, her hands moving instinctively. The jets moved in tandem with her cargo plane, forming a protective shield, anticipating threats she hadn't yet detected, marveled at the coordination, precision born of discipline and experience. But her responsibility remained paramount. She was the linchpin. Every move, every calculation rested on her shoulders, and she embraced it with quiet determination. Turbulence intensified. Ice crystals whipped past the windshield, glinting in the sunlight, blinding at times. Toggled the de-icing system, then corrected for subtle shifts in lift and thrust. Flight 492 remained steady under her guidance, but she knew the pilot's confidence hinged entirely on her composure. Any misstep, any hesitation could trigger panic, leading to disaster. Yet she remained calm, each breath measured, each decision precise. She felt an uncanny sense of clarity, as if every nerve in her body had synchronized with the plane's movements, with the turbulence, with the elite jets flanking her. Minutes stretched. Every second felt like a test of skill and nerve. Communicated continuously, issuing precise instructions to Flight 492 and responding to F-22 updates. She anticipated wind shear, adjusted speed, and even visualized the ground below, ensuring a smooth path for eventual descent. The roar of engines, the howling wind, and the constant flicker of instruments created a symphony of tension, yet she remained center stage, orchestrating calm in chaos. Finally, the worst of the turbulence passed, though the sky remained alive with energy. Exhaled slowly, allowing herself a fraction of relief, yet her focus remained razor-sharp. She looked at Flight 492 trailing safely behind, at the F-22s forming a protective perimeter, and felt a surge of pride. The cargo plane had survived the storm, but knew the mission was far from over. The sky had tested her, and she had answered. In that suspended moment, Harper understood the essence of her role, not merely a cargo pilot, but a guide, a protector, a calm center in a world of chaos. And as the mountains gave way to open plains below, she realized that the sky, vast and indifferent, had recognized her competence, courage, and unflinching resolve. Today, she was no longer ordinary. Inside the cockpit, felt the weight of responsibility pressing against her chest. heavier than any turbulence or mechanical strain. Her hands rested on the controls steady, but her mind was alive with calculations, contingency plans, and constant awareness of Flight 492 trailing behind. Beyond instruments and radar, there were humans, pilots, families, people waiting on the ground who didn't know their lives depended on her calm authority. Every command she gave had a human consequence. This realization sharpened her instincts even further, reminding her that flying was never purely mechanical. It was deeply human. His voice cut crisply through the radio. Flight 492, adjust your bank slowly, 15 degrees left. Maintain throttle at 75%. Watch your altitude, you're doing fine. Her words were precise, measured, and deliberate. She understood that panic could spread faster than wind, that fear could destabilize the most experienced pilot. The trembling voice of the pilot behind her steadied with each instruction, guided by his calm, unwavering presence. For once, being just a cargo pilot no longer mattered. Her knowledge, composure, and courage became the difference between chaos and survival. She stole a brief glance at the F-22s, still flanking her plane like guardians in the sky. Their engines hummed a high-pitched counterpoint to the roar of her own aircraft, and felt a curious mix of awe and solidarity. These pilots were trained for combat, for speed, for precision, yet here they were, deferring to her judgment. In that moment, the invisible boundary between civilian and military blurred. Harper, a single cargo pilot, had become a linchpin in a synchronized aerial operation none had anticipated. Her mind flicked back to personal memories she had carried quietly, long nights away from her family, sacrificed birthdays and anniversaries, hours spent in lonely hangars repeating checklists until the motions became muscle memory. Every mundane flight, every repetition that had seemed tiresome now revealed its purpose. Those ordinary moments had forged instincts that could save lives. And now, in the eye of a storm of turbulence, emergency signals, and elite jets, that preparation was paying off in ways she had never imagined. Suddenly, a warning alarm beeped sharply on Flight 492's instrument panel. Heart skipped a beat, but her voice did not falter. Correct heading 350. Increase your climb by 20 feet per second. Maintain course. Trust your instruments. She calculated the trajectory, adjusted throttle, and visualized the plane's movements with meticulous precision. The F-22s mirrored her decisions, creating a protective corridor around the stricken aircraft. The dance was dangerous, delicate, and yet strangely beautiful, a testament to human skill and trust, the invisible threads connecting people across thousands of feet of air. Thought of the families who would receive the supplies she was carrying. Some were in hospitals awaiting urgent medical materials, others depended on the delivery for survival. Every second of calm she could impart to the distressed pilot, every precise movement she made, was a lifeline to people she would never meet. The realization struck her. Heroism wasn't about rank, medals, or recognition. It was about ordinary humans rising to extraordinary circumstances, making decisions that could ripple through countless lives. Minutes passed like hours, continued guiding, recalibrating, coordinating, and speaking with quiet authority. The F-22s remained her steadfast allies, the sky their shared domain. The human factor, the courage, trust, and cooperation, had become the invisible engine driving survival. Harper understood that leadership wasn't about position, it was about presence, decisiveness, and empathy. She had embodied all of it in the cockpit today, in the face of turbulence, chaos, and life-and-death stakes. As the first rays of sunlight glimmered on the distant plains below, felt a cautious relief, though tension lingered. Flight 492 was stable, the cargo secure, and the F-22s held formation. She exhaled slowly, realizing that the human element, trust, communication, courage, had been just as vital as skill or instruments. For the first time, she felt the full weight of her impact. Today, she was no longer invisible, no longer just a cargo pilot. She was a guardian, a leader, and a lifeline. Hands were steady on the yoke, but her mind raced with calculations. The turbulence had lessened, Yet every mile ahead carried new threats, unpredictable winds, shifting air pressure, and the weight of critical cargo. Flight 492 followed closely, responding to her every command. The F-22s maintained a protective formation around her, silent guardians whose presence was as comforting as it was intimidating. Pulse steadied in rhythm with her training. She had faced storms before, but never with so much at stake, never with elite pilots deferring to her instinct, never with lives suspended on her judgment. Her voice crackled through the radio again, calm but commanding. Flight 492, maintain heading 370, adjust throttle to 80%. You're doing excellent. Keep wings level and monitor instruments. The pilot behind her obeyed, trembling but alive, guided by precise instructions. She watched the radar carefully, eyes darting between blips moving faster than expected. The F-22s mirrored her maneuvers, adjusting formation as if reading her mind. It was a high-stakes ballet, and Harper, once invisible in civilian skis, had become its conductor. She thought briefly of the cargo, the medical supplies, food, and essentials that depended on her safe passage. Each package represented lives waiting on the ground, families unaware of the chaos unfolding above them. The thought sharpened her focus. It became an invisible engine driving every decision, every microadjustment, every command. She was not just a pilot anymore. She was a lifeline, a force connecting sky and earth, human and machine. The stakes transformed her routine flight into a mission demanding courage, strategy, and unflinching calm. Minutes passed, each one stretching into an eternity, calculated every angle, every speed, every subtle shift in wind and turbulence. The F-22s communicated silently through formation adjustments, their trust in her growing with every successful maneuver. She realized the extraordinary truth of the moment. The sky, vast and indifferent, had recognized her skill and authority. She was no longer ordinary. The title of cargo pilot had become meaningless. Today, she was a guardian of lives, a stabilizing presence in chaos. A sudden burst of turbulence jolted the plane sharply, forcing to react instantly. She adjusted throttle, flaps, and rudder, stabilizing the aircraft while simultaneously directing Flight 492. Her eyes flicked to the radar. One of the blips moved erratically, closer than it should have been. Her heart skipped, but fear did not govern her. Decisions had to be precise, swift, and calculated. She executed a smooth, controlled maneuver, avoiding potential disaster, and the cargo plane steadied. Flight 492 remained on course, and the F-22s acknowledged her adjustment with subtle formation shifts. Focus never wavered. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep awareness of her own resilience and training. Every hour of simulator practice, every long night in the cockpit, every routine delivery had prepared her for this moment. She had broken through ordinary expectations, pushing her abilities beyond any previous limits. Yet there was no time for reflection. The mission demanded vigilance. Each decision had life-or-death consequences, not just for her, but for the pilot behind her, the lives on the ground, and the people counting on the supplies she carried. As the sun dipped lower, casting long golden streaks across clouds and peaks, guided the cargo plane with unwavering calm. Flight 492 trailed safely behind. The F-22s continued their silent escort, exhaled slowly, letting herself feel a spark of quiet triumph. She had navigated turbulence, danger, and elite jets with poise, skill, and courage. She had broken through, not just in the air but within herself. Ordinary had ended. She was no longer invisible. She was a hero in the sky, a bridge between lives and survival, and a symbol of courage under pressure. Eyes scanned the runway ahead, the small Montana airfield growing larger through the cockpit window. After hours of turbulence, emergency maneuvers, and coordinating with elite F-22s, the most dangerous part of her journey, the final descent, was upon her. Flight 492 followed her lead, its pilot relying entirely on her calm authority. Every decision mattered: angle of approach, throttle adjustments, wind correction. She toggled the flaps carefully, adjusted the yoke with precision, and calculated the exact moment to engage the landing gear. Her pulse remained steady. Years of training had prepared her for this moment, yet adrenaline still coursed through her veins. The runway seemed deceptively simple but knew better. A miscalculation, even a fraction, could send tons of cargo crashing, or worse, jeopardize the lives she had worked so hard to protect. She glanced at Flight 492, trusting her guidance. "Maintain 2 degrees right bank, altitude stable. You've got this," she instructed. Her voice, calm yet commanding, carried reassurance. The pilot behind her responded with quiet acknowledgement, hands gripping the controls as precision dictated the rhythm of descent. The F-22s flanked them, a protective corridor as they navigated the final miles of the journey. The cargo plane shuddered slightly as a gust of wind swept across the runway, but reacted instantly, adjusting rudder and throttle to compensate. Each correction was seamless, almost instinctual. She felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper in her chest, tempered by a growing sense of pride. The cargo, vital medical supplies, emergency provisions, and essential equipment, was still secure. Flight 492 mirrored her movements, following her lead perfectly. The harmony of aircraft, pilot, and human resolve was breathtaking, a testament to skill under extreme pressure. As the runway approached, exhaled slowly but deliberately, keeping her hands steady on the yoke. She had practiced countless landings in simulators, but nothing matched the intensity of today. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden streaks across the tarmac. She lowered the plane gently, wheels connecting with asphalt with a controlled thud. Flight 492 touched down safely behind her, tires rolling smoothly. The F-22s circled overhead briefly, then banked and peeled away, acknowledging her competence and leadership. Relief washed over, but she remained alert, completing final checks as ground crews scrambled to secure cargo and passengers. People had begun gathering near the small terminal, unaware of the drama that had unfolded in the sky above. Emergency personnel and local authorities looked on, impressed but puzzled by the coordination of civilian and military aircraft. Exhaled again, this time letting herself feel the gravity of her achievement. She had navigated turbulence, mechanical strain, and extraordinary pressure. She had saved lives, delivered critical supplies, and coordinated with some of the most elite pilots in the country. And she had done it with humility, never seeking attention. As the engines powered down, removed her headset, feeling the tension slowly drain. Her colleagues approached, a mix of relief and admiration in their eyes. "You did it," one whispered, offered a modest smile. "We all did it," she replied. Flight 492's pilot emerged, visibly shaken but alive, shaking her hand with gratitude. Families and recipients of the cargo had no idea the risks endured above them, but knew. Each life saved, each package delivered, was a quiet victory, monumental in its significance. Even as the plane cooled, reflected on what had transpired. She had begun the day as an ordinary cargo pilot, invisible to the world, carrying out routine tasks. But today, her skill, courage, and calm had transformed her role. She had become indispensable in a moment of crisis, bridging civilian and military domains, commanding respect not through rank, but through action. As she gazed out at the fading sun, Harper understood that heroism often comes in quiet, unseen forms. Until sometimes, the sky recognizes it. Harper walked across the tarmac, the Montana wind tugging at her flight jacket. The cargo plane stood silent behind her, engines cooled, the ordeal finally over. For hours she had navigated turbulence, guided Flight 492, and coordinated with F-22s in ways no civilian pilot had ever experienced. She had faced extreme danger and emerged unscathed, her skill and courage having carried lives safely to the ground. Yet amidst the adrenaline and relief, she felt an unfamiliar awareness. The sky had changed her. She was no longer just a cargo pilot. She had become a symbol of calm authority in crisis. Media crews swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. His name was repeated with awe. the civilian pilot who had commanded the sky, who had orchestrated military jets and saved a life. Yet she remained composed, deflecting attention from herself. "I was just doing my job," she said, voice calm but firm, eyes scanning the horizon. She knew that the real heroism lay not in recognition, but in decisive action, in the lives saved, in the courage that ordinary people summon when confronted by extraordinary circumstances. Her words, though modest, carried weight. Everyone listening sensed the quiet authority beneath them. Pilots and F-22 crew gathered nearby, nodding with respect and camaraderie. They had seen her decisions, her precision, and her calmness in real time, and they were impressed. A few shared subtle gestures of acknowledgement, a nod, a salute, a quiet comment over the radio. Who had spent her career in relative anonymity, now stood at the center of a rare intersection, civilian expertise commanding military respect. She realized then that her skills, often overlooked in routine flights, had become indispensable. Her ordinary life had transformed into an extraordinary story, one written not in accolades but in action. She glanced toward Flight 492's pilot, who approached with a shaky smile, gratitude etched on his face. "I wouldn't have made it without you," he admitted, nodded, feeling a warmth that recognition from strangers often failed to elicit. The real reward was knowing that lives were safe. Her cargo, vital supplies, would reach those who depended on it. Families awaiting medical equipment or food would receive it because of her, because she had acted decisively when chaos demanded more than protocol. The human impact pressed upon her heart, more than the cameras or headlines ever could. Over the next hours, debriefed with military officials and air traffic control, recounting every detail of the flight. Her calm composure, precise recollection, and unwavering professionalism impressed everyone in the room. Even as they praised her, remained grounded, emphasizing teamwork and coordination. The extraordinary had been made possible not by a single hero, but by collaboration, trust, and shared focus. And yet she knew that she had been the catalyst, the linchpin whose decisions shaped the outcome. Weeks later, returned to her routine flights, carrying cargo across familiar routes. Nothing about the sky had changed, yet everything had. Fellow pilots greeted her differently, with respect and admiration, aware of the courage she had demonstrated. She began mentoring younger pilots, sharing lessons about calm under pressure, human factors in aviation, and the value of preparation. Her story became legend in certain circles, told quietly, respectfully, as an example of ordinary courage achieving extraordinary results. Harper had moved beyond anonymity, leaving a legacy in the sky that others could follow. She often reflected on that fateful day, the moment the F-22s had appeared, the way Flight 492 had trusted her guidance, and how every decision rippled through countless lives. She understood that heroism was not a title, not a medal, but a choice. The choice to act with courage, clarity, and care when the unexpected arrives. Looking out across the endless horizon, felt a deep, unspoken bond with the sky. It had tested her, revealed her strengths, and transformed her. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was a guardian of the air, a mentor, and a symbol of courage. And above all, she knew she was ready for whatever skis awaited.